harm reduction therapy is an alternative to what has been a prevailing abstinence-only approach in addiction treatment. So it's an alternative, and it really arose as a kind of corrective and a response to the failure or the limitations of traditional addiction treatment. The way that I see it is that the harm reduction frame is a set of principles that really frame helping relationships. And the essence of that is that we want to invite people into helping relationships without imposing presumptions about the nature of their problem or the nature of addiction and the goals and approach to change. So that it's really about keeping our agendas to the side so that we can create a safe space to support people in discovering what's true for them about this complex addictive relationship and what goals and approach to change best suit them.
Wow. Okay. So it's really important not to impose our values on the person we're trying to help, and to be meeting them where they're at and starting from there.
Yeah, that's the essence. Meeting people where they're at is kind of the phrase that best describes a harm reduction approach. And so the therapeutic or helping implication of that is that we have to keep ourselves out of the way. And, and that's a very complex process that we might unpack a little bit. Why that is so important is that there are so many, I think, dominant narratives, ideas, presumptions about what we call addiction and people who struggle with problematic substance use that are basically wrong. And we need to really work on kind of keeping ourselves in check so that we don't either consciously or unconsciously impose them on the people that we're trying to be helpful to. And that imposition is ultimately going to contaminate our ability to be helpful.
So now, Dr. Tatarsky, I want to maybe ask about the abstinence-only assumption and its effects on treatment. And, why doesn't this work?
Well, first of all, because it's a preconceived presumption. Okay. And the way that I understand it is this idea that abstinence is the only measure of success. So that's one presumption. Anything short of abstinence is considered failure. And often in traditional treatment, it's a requirement to commit to abstinence in order to be in treatment and to remain abstinence in order to be kept in treatment. So I believe that becomes effectively a barrier to the overwhelming majority of people that are struggling with substances, who, at least at the point that they become concerned about their use, are unlikely to be able to either commit to abstinence or successfully achieve abstinence. So it's an unrealistic expectation that is likely to be a kind of mismatch with where people are motivationally, and therefore derail treatment right at the start. And I believe, and I would sort of ask the listeners of this conversation to consider, at the point that people become concerned about their substance use or any other problematic or risky behavior, what percentage of those folks do you think are ready to commit to stopping? Even if there's a part of them that wants to stop. So, and it's likely to be close to zero, I would suggest. There is some data to that effect, but very little. I mean, one piece of data is from the household survey on drug use and health that's done every year by the federal government. They asked a group of people who needed and wanted treatment why they didn't access it. And the largest group in that group said that it was because they didn't want to stop using. They needed and wanted treatment, but they didn't want to stop using. And so if most of the treatment out there is oriented toward abstinence, it's going to be that mismatch. Just one other sentence, and that is that there's an abstinence-only corollary in psychotherapy or general mental health care, which still to this day many people believe that if you are a person seriously struggling with substances, you can't benefit from psychotherapy unless you have already, quote, gotten sober. So there, again, you see, there's a barrier for those people in addiction treatment and a barrier for them in psychotherapy. So that, I think, is a huge majority of people that are struggling that have been effectively kept out of care. The harm reduction tilt opens the door and says, we'll meet you wherever you are, around non-abstinence goals, around pre-action stages of change, and whatever motivates you to begin a positive change process is where we begin.
The thing that really helped this to hit home for me was I heard you speak elsewhere about, if someone was to go to a gym for the first time and sign up, and the personal trainer there says, okay, great, let's get you signed up. You're going to run a marathon in a month. All right. That's the equivalent of asking someone that is struggling with problematic substance use, ask them to go abstinent straight away. It's like asking someone to run a marathon and they're not ready,
Right. And if, you walk into a gym, it's likely that the first question that you'll be asked is, what are your goals? What are you interested in doing? In a sense, how can we help you? That's starting where you are. So we do that in most other areas of care or service. We've got to wonder, why don't we do that with people that struggle with drugs?